Melissa Mayer is a learning specialist at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida, and a former grade school teacher who worked with students with IEPs to ensure their educational needs were met, they succeeded, and met promotional criteria. Fiona Rattray is a parent training and information specialist at Westchester Independent Living Center in White Plains, New York, a peer-driven, community-based organization that empowers people with disabilities to lead self-directed lives. She develops, coordinates, and conducts parent, professional, and youth trainings in person and through webinars on the special education process, advocacy, transition planning, and building parent-school partnerships. Ann Siegel is the legal director for Disability Rights Florida, a nonprofit that provides legal advocacy and rights protection for adults and children with a wide range of disabilities. She oversees their advocacy, education, and outreach team. So let's start with you, Melissa. What typically happens at an IEP meeting?
Well, typically the team of people arrive. There's the classroom teacher, varying exceptionalities or exceptional student education teacher, anybody who actually tested the student, speech pathologist, psychologist, social worker, the parent, anyone they choose to bring, and sometimes the student, depending on their age. And what they do is they discuss the results of the testing, both good and bad. And then they create and discuss a plan that has concrete goals that translate into being able to, for the student to be able to learn what the other student population is learning in the classroom with whatever assistance is needed to learn those things. It's either that would be the first meeting, or there would be an update meeting where the plan would be updated and the goals would be adjusted to continue to assist the student to be successful.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Fiona, are there IEP meetings for kindergarten students? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, actually, Daryl, there are IEP meetings from the age of 3, because students can be referred and be classified from the age of 3 onwards. And that's called the Committee for Preschool Special Education, sometimes referred to as CPSE. When they get to the year where they're going to turn 5 and they're going to be entering kindergarten, there will be a meeting called a CPSE to CSE meeting, where the teachers and support staff that work with that student will meet with the parents, look at evaluations, look at the child's progress, and make a determination as to whether or not that child is going to need services when they enter kindergarten. If that's the case, then there will usually be a follow-on IEP meeting to consider what needs to go into the planning for that student when they enter kindergarten. So very much the same format. As you go through school and the child gets older, the meetings may become a bit longer because you have a lot more information to work with.
Thank you, Fiona. So Ann, since IEPs are a school process, is there some homework that parents should do in advance of the meeting to ensure that they are prepared to be their child's best advocate?
Absolutely. I recommend that parents request any and all reports, work samples, evaluations, anything that's going to be discussed at the IEP meeting prior to the meeting so they can adequately prepare for it. Also, during the school year, as parents receive report cards, they should also be receiving progress notes with those report cards. So parents should be documenting and tracking the progress their child's making toward achieving their IEP goals throughout the school year. So with that information and their progress reports, the parents are adequately prepared to come in and have meaningful participation in the IEP meeting.
So Melissa, are there some important questions that parents should ask in advance of the IEP meeting?
There are questions that parents should ask in advance and during the IEP meeting. Things like, what would this look like in the classroom? What type of assistance will my student receive in the classroom? Also, is my child going to be pulled from the classroom? And if so, how are they going to make up the learning time missed if pulled from the classroom? Who specifically is going to be providing the services for my child? How often will we be updated on our child's progress? Can we ask for more reports than just midterm and end of the semester or end of the 9 weeks? And what are some of the things that we can do at home to follow through on what is being done in the classroom so that our child can be as successful as possible?
Thank you. Fiona, so we've been talking about things to do ahead of the meeting, and we've kind of touched on some of the paperwork, but should things like a meeting agenda, the child's most recent IEP, and copies of the notes and reports, should those things be available to the parents to be able to preview ahead of the meeting?
So ordinarily the schools would send out a letter detailing the meeting, so the time it's going to take place, the date, and who's likely to be participating in the meeting. They don't always send an agenda, but I would encourage parents to actually draft their own agendas and to share those with the school district, with the CSE chair prior to the meeting. It doesn't have to be anything really formal. It just helps the people who are going to be in that meeting understand what the parents' priorities are. I would suggest listing at least 3 priorities for that meeting. Prior to the meeting, the parents should expect to receive, they should already have a copy of the IEP. They should receive that before the beginning of the school year. But if they don't have one, they should certainly request a copy of it. They should also expect to receive reports from any therapists or psychologists working with the child, and reports from any new evaluations. And I would want those at least a week before the CSE meeting, so I have time to look at them as a parent and to understand them. Also, if as a parent you have had any private tuition or evaluations carried out for your child, you need to share those as well with the CSE chair prior to the meeting.
Thank you. So, Anne, we could do several episodes of the show and still not cover every question that parents could ask during an IEP meeting, but I'm wondering if you can give us kind of a tip sheet on some of the more critical questions parents should be asking during the meeting to ensure they quote unquote win the meeting.
Well, when parents come to the IEP meeting, they really need to focus on what the priority educational need will be for their child. So I would ask that parents know and ask the questions that regard what exactly is their child's present level of performance. So when the IEP team is getting ready to draft this document, they need to develop the present level of performance, which is kind of the roadmap to what the student will get in order to receive a free and appropriate public education. So parents need to not hesitate to ask exactly, what level my child is doing in reading, math, wherever their area of need is. And they need to make sure that when this plan is drafted, that the present level of performance is drafted with specificity. So what we need to know is when this document, if the child should move to another school or another district or another state, that this document will be portable enough that anyone picking up can read and know exactly what the child needs. So the parent needs to be asking, exactly what services the child will be receiving, and those need to be drafted with specificity. Who's providing them, where they're providing them, when, like, for example, if your child is receiving speech language services, you would want to know, where they're receiving it. Is it in the classroom? Is it a pull-out session? How much? How long? Are they getting it for 90 minutes a week? Are they breaking it into, 3 sessions? And where that will be delivered. So parents really need to be asking those questions that will ensure that the goals, objectives, and related services, accommodations, modifications, and placement are all really clearly defined on the IEP plan.
Thank you very much. So Melissa, IDEA lists mandated IEP team members, but how important is it to ensure that a general education teacher is part of the process and that teacher stays throughout the meeting?
Well, as a former classroom teacher, I believe it is incredibly important for the teacher to be in the room for multiple reasons. First of all, the classroom teacher is the person who will be spending the most educational time with the student during the school day. This is the teacher that should be aware of the student's specific needs so that they can be met as often as possible during the school day. And as a classroom teacher, I was also tasked with tracking data on that student. So I would need to know what type of data I was tracking to help the team determine whether or not the interventions and the assistance was helping. Also, we are the ones who know the student in an academic setting, so we should have input as to whether or not we believe what they are wanting to put into the IEP is something that will benefit the student or that the student will not be able to tolerate, or how they would react to any type of intervention. We've spent the most time with the student in that setting, so we should be a part of this meeting from beginning to end to best assist the student.
Thank you, Melissa. Fiona, as the IEP meeting unfolds, should parents ever be hesitant about asking why as they are being deluged by the information presented to them?
Absolutely not. Parents can and should ask as many questions as they can during the meeting. They're a key member of the team. And you know your child better than anyone else. Yes, the school and the teachers know your child as a learner, but you've known that child since the day they were born. So you need to feel that you are a core component of that meeting, and you need to understand everything that's being said in the meeting. There's a lot of special education jargon that tends to come up, so I'd recommend to parents that they look for some commonly used terms online, acronyms that come up in these meetings, and that will help them to not have to ask why quite so often. But this is their best opportunity to have a full and frank discussion with the team that's working with to support their child. So make sure that you understand absolutely everything. There's no such thing as a stupid question.
Thank you, Fiona. And so Fiona hit on something that I want to have you amplify a bit. As she mentioned, the teachers are experts at educating students, but parents are the experts on their kids. So I guess my question to you is, should parents be reticent about telling these educators that, hey, you know what works at home for my kid is this. Maybe it would work in the classroom to help them find the success they need?
Absolutely. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, parents are a required member to the IEP team meeting, and they need to have meaningful participation. With that meaningful participation, I don't mean just lip service. What they know about their child really needs to be considered. You know, as stated, teachers are professionals. Well, parents are the experts in their child. They have them 24/7. They know them across all settings. And quite honestly, you know, a school district is responsible for a child maybe through their 21st year, but as parents, we're responsible for our children for the rest of their lives. So every decision that's made is very important. And from the time, you know, your child is first diagnosed through their whole academic career, every decision that is made for that child is important. So I constantly remind parents that even if you have a little one in preschool or kindergarten, those decisions that you're making are so very important. So make sure that you have meaningful participation in that and understand that all the decisions made are going to impact that child's future, because in the end, our goal is to prepare the child to be as independent as they can possibly be, whether they want to go into post-secondary education or right into employment. The goal is to ensure independence for that child.
Thank you very much, Ann. And I want to close out our session with two kind of bullet round questions. And the first one, and this goes to you, Melissa, I wanted to talk about tone. How would you describe the tone of these meetings as far as how parents should approach it? I'm assuming they should not come at this in an adversarial way.
Unfortunately, sometimes that happens, but the goal is for everybody to work together. Be heard. As a parent, you should be heard. But as a parent, you should also listen to some of the results. But communication is key before, during, and after the meeting. Working together as a team for the best for your child. Everybody is invested emotionally in the benefits of your child learning. Parents more so because that is their child. Being adversarial doesn't make progress during the meeting. What makes progress is everybody working together, accepting different opinions, thinking about how each person's ideas could work with the other ideas in order to benefit the child.
Thank you. Fiona, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and as a Brit, I'd really like to see a pot of tea and some mugs or some coffee in those meetings, because they can be quite intimidating to parents. You walk into the room and there's a whole array of school district staff sitting there looking at you expectantly. What we want to be working towards is a more collegiate atmosphere where we all understand why we're there. We're there for the child. We encourage parents sometimes to even bring in a photograph of the child or a little summary, just to remind everyone that's what we're here for. We're here to discuss this child's needs and come up with the best possible plan to meet those needs.
Thank you. Anne, you want to close us out on this question?
Absolutely. It really, honestly, it takes a village. So we need to have a good working relationship with the school staff. And we recommend that parents bring an advocate with them, somebody to help keep them on track, make sure that the focus remains on the child, and make sure that everything about it is planning for the child's future and nothing ever becomes personal or any kind of power struggle through it, because the focus does need to remain on the child and what the child needs to receive a free and appropriate public education.
All right. So our last question for the entire panel is, after the IEP meeting, how can parents make sure that they stay on top of the process and ensure that the child's IEP is implemented properly? And then we'll go to Melissa for this.
As a classroom teacher, in order to make sure that the parents were aware of how things were moving along with the IEP, communication happened in multiple ways. Through emails, we used different remind apps, and the parents need to be positive with the teacher in asking the questions, but this is their student, and if they would like to know what's going on, they need to feel comfortable asking the questions, and the teachers need to feel comfortable answering the questions. They must communicate with each other for the benefit of the student. And knowing what's going on with your student is very important on both sides. So communication is very, very important. And that should also maybe be discussed during the IEP meeting, how often the parents can be guaranteed to know what's going on with their student.
Fiona?
I would agree with Melissa. Communication is absolutely key. It's important to know what the lines of communication are. Usually your child will have an IEP teacher or an IEP manager who is the main person responsible for overseeing it. So be aware of who that person is. Maybe establish how often you should be communicating with each other. With children that have really complex needs, you may need to request team meetings on your IEP that could take place on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis. And talk to your child. Make sure you understand what's happening with your child. Keep an eye on their schoolwork, keep an eye on their reports, and become really familiar with the IEP. Make sure you really understand what it's all about. Some of the goals on IEPs can be very difficult to decipher. Ask for explanations if you're not sure what they're about. The more that everybody is on the same page, the better chance you have of making the IEP successful for your child.
And last word to you, Anne.
Absolutely. You need to monitor throughout the school year. As I stated, report cards should come with progress reports on the goals of how the child's doing in their IEP And these goals need to be measurable. They need to be at percentages. If you have a child who has an 80% mastery, we need to know throughout the quarters of the school how close that child is coming to those IEP goals. Also, work samples are important. Things should be coming home from school, what the child is working on. And you could also ask on the child's individual education plan to have written notes back and forth, either on a weekly or daily basis, depending on the child's needs, so that you're on top of everything throughout the school year, so there are no surprises at the IEP meeting.
All right. Well, there you have it. And Melissa Mayer, Fiona Rattray, and Ann Siegel, thanks for the knowledge.